Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, or it's actually a Q&A episode, also a solo episode, but I have a few questions from last week's Instagram Q&A that I want to go over today. But first, before I dive into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. First, if you were sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, then my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to visualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. There's also at least 1 and 2 bottlenecks that we figure out outside of the training and nutrition protocol that are keeping you from seeing the results that you want to see. And this holds people back more than they think. And so we dive into that and see if there's anything like that going on there. If you aren't interested in full coaching, I do one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and or map out a game plan. Also on the coaching, if you do want more information, there's a link to apply in the show notes. You can reach out to me on Instagram to ask any other further questions you have. But then I do have the one-on-one consultations that I just went over. And then lastly, if you want to learn more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, I have my 75-minute masterclass on this. And you can find the link to that in the show notes as well. Next, you can follow me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. The link is also in the show notes as well to my Instagram. But if you have any questions or you want to follow these Q&As or you want to ask any specific questions, that's where you would follow me at. And then lastly, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. So with that out of the way, let's dive into the questions today. So my first question was, how can I know if I'm eating enough protein? And this is a hard one because I don't think there's any physical, like any way that you would be able to tell that you're actually eating enough. But also one thing that is important too is like, what is the main goal here? Are you just trying to eat enough to like maintain basic bodily functions? Is this to maximize muscle growth? I'm going to dive into the role of protein in different phases of nutrition and stuff. That would be the first thing that I would want to know is, what is your goal here? Because that is going to be different than, again, if we're trying to maximize muscle growth, this number is probably going to be a little bit different than if we're just trying to just hit our minimums for basic bodily functions. So that's the first thing there. But as far as this goes, I don't think there's anything that is going to tell you. Before I continue here, I think that's important because those numbers are going to be different. For basic bodily functions here, the RDA has protein set at, let's look at this real quick. It's not very high. So it's 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that's going to be around 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that's what the RDA sets for protein, which is probably pretty low, but that's again for basic bodily functions and to prevent a deficiency there at that point. And again, remember, this is based off of the average sedentary adult as well too. So this isn't an active person. So again, that number is going to be different. And then as far as like maximizing muscle growth goes, there's a lot of different numbers that you'll get anywhere from, I'm going to go back to I guess you could say 0.18 or 1.8 to 2.2 kilograms per pound of body weight, of body weight. And then from body weight standpoint, anywhere from like 0.7, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. I think those numbers match up. They're at least relatively close, right? That's going to be your muscle building aspect of it there with that. So that would be the number that I would be looking at with that to do that. But as far as like knowing, it's really hard. I don't think there's going to be any physical way. So from like a calorie standpoint, we would have a good idea to know if you're eating enough calories or not. Where there's a couple things we can go off of. There's the scale weight, right? Seeing what your scale weight's doing over time. That's going to help you figure out if you're eating enough calories, not enough, too much, too little, whatever it may be for your goal, because we can look at your body weight and then we can be like, hey, you're probably eating too many calories. Maybe you need to increase or decrease your movement, but either way, your calorie balance is out of whack here compared to what you want to do. But again, our scale weight is going to tell us that. So we can look at that. We can also look at like fullness cues as well. Finishing a meal and being super stuffed, probably going to lend to a calorie surplus over time. Eating meals and still being hungry after them, probably going to lend to a calorie deficit over time. So those are some things you can look at. But as far as protein goes, there's not going to be anything that can be like, oh, hey, you're eating, the sign is good to know that you're eating enough protein. I would say the only thing that you could potentially look at here would be your overall satiety, because protein tends to be a little bit depending on your choice of protein, but most proteins is going to increase your satiety. So that would be the one thing I would look at. But otherwise, you're probably just going to have to go off of your numbers. You're probably going to have to track this to make sure that you're getting enough. Again, like I said, from a building muscle standpoint, 1 gram per pound of body weight or 2.2 kilograms is a solid number to go off of. If you're trying to build muscle and you fall a little less than that, say 0.7 gram per pound of body weight or 1.4 kg, you just want to make sure your protein quality is high. We want to make sure these proteins have all the essential amino acids in them at that point if you go a little bit lower. And obviously the big thing here is we want to make sure we combine this with the signal to build muscle, which is proper resistance training. And that is obviously the most important. You don't want to skip over that, right? Because protein's not going to cause you to build muscle. You need to make sure you send that signal there with it. So I was also taking this from, you could look at this from the opposite end of the spectrum, where if you run into not enough protein, that would probably be a better indicator versus enough. Brittle hair and nails are a sign of deficiency, feeling weak or hungry, getting sick often. These are all some things that you could potentially look at here to see if you're not getting enough protein. But that's going to start to, again, that's that really low amount there that we talked about. Muscle weakness, stress fractures are also some things that you could look at as well too there with that. But again, that's going to be on that. If you're trying to build muscle, if you're at that point, you're in trouble there with your protein. People do, when I get new clients and they come to me and we look at their protein, it is relatively low, but it never is this low to where they're at like deficiency standpoint. And also I had an episode with Eric Trexler. I'm going to pull this up real quick to see the exact number, but we talked about protein, and you could probably get away with a little less protein than you think. Now, if you want to be on the safe side, I would just go closer to that 1 gram per pound of body weight, but you could probably get away with a little less protein than you think and still be able to build muscle, so long as you send that signal, that signal there with the proper resistance training. And so I'm going to look this up real quick to see the episode so I can give this to you guys. This is going to be episode 225, all about protein satiety, requirements, sources, and more. And so that's a good episode there to reference. So also with protein, let's keep this in mind. And I mentioned this, protein plays a submissive role in muscle growth. What I mean by that is you need to send the signal to build muscle, resistance training, and ensuring you get enough protein helps complete the process. But it can only happen if you send the signal to build muscle. So again, if you don't resistance train, but you just increase your protein intake, that's not going to help with building muscle. Again, we can, by getting your protein to a certain level, you can offset those potential issues that you have with protein deficiency, but it's not going to help you build muscle. Now, from a fat loss perspective, protein can help with satiety, which can help with moderating your overall caloric intake. If we find more filling foods, it's going to be easier to stick to the calorie amount that we need to, right? Versus if you're always hungry, it's going to be tough to stick to the calorie amount that you need to for a calorie deficit. So protein can be helpful from that perspective, but it also helps you maintain your lean body mass during times of caloric restriction. However, again, you need to make sure that you send that signal to build muscle in order for your body to maintain it, right? So you need to have that combination there. A combination of protein and weight training in a calorie deficit is going to preserve muscle mass and ensure that the weight that you lose is fat mass. So that's the role of protein here. It's going to play a submissive role in muscle growth. Obviously, you need that protein to complete the process, but you have to make sure you weight train. And then from a fat loss perspective, it can help with satiety. So it can indirectly help with your caloric intake, which is going to help with fat loss. And then it can also help you maintain your lean body mass combined with resistance training in a calorie deficit. So that's the role of protein. I just wanted to hit on that real quick. So that sums up the protein aspect of it. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, I wish there was some sort of way of, hey, this sign right here is, hey, you got enough protein in. It's going to be a little bit of a trial and error. Just make sure you don't go super low with it, and you should be good to go there with it. Next question is the assisted pull-up machine a good substitute for pull-ups? And 10%, 1,000%, I think this is a great substitute. This is probably one of my most favorite machines to program for clients, and it's probably one of the most, it would be the most programmed if it was in every gym and clients had access to it. But I think it's super beneficial. Most people, their pull-up technique is just dog crap, to be honest. And they think they can do it, but their technique is terrible. And then it's just, we're not getting as much out of the pull-ups as we could if we do it with good techniques. Most people need to spend some time on the assisted pull-up machine before doing bodyweight pull-ups. And even if you can do a bodyweight pull-up, it's a great way to accumulate some training volume with doing pull-ups, right? Because I think the downside with regular pull-ups is it's hard to get in enough volume to really build muscle with it and to continue to get stronger over time, because a lot of people do struggle with getting 5-6+ reps on pull-ups. So the machine can be a great way to practice the movement, get good at it, get better at it, but also it allows us to get in enough training volume with these pull-ups to be able to get stronger and to build muscle with them. Otherwise, you're going to have to rely on lat pull downs, which is fine. Lat pull downs are great. Being able to do pull-ups, I think, is a great skill to master. So again, it allows us to do that. So I will commonly program assisted pull-up machine. If you're somebody that's interested in being a client at some point, or you've been a client in the past, or you are a client currently, I'm sure you've seen this at some point. You will see it, and you probably have seen it at some point. Again, it's just overrated, or it's overrated. It's though I think a lot of people, again, it's an ego thing. Oh, I should be doing body weight pull-ups, which again, most people cannot complete a solid pull-up with good technique. And we don't just want to be doing pull-ups for the sake of doing pull-ups. We want to make sure it's with good technique. Otherwise, it's going to lead to injury and just a lot of junk volume in general. But yeah, certainly underutilized for sure in most. So that was a great question. I wanted to hit on that. So my last question for the day is, do I have to do cardio for a body recomp? And 100% you don't have to do cardio. However, I do think it will benefit your body overall. The most important factors for body recomp are going to be your nutrition, right? We want to make sure we're in the proper energy balance. We want to make sure we're getting the right amount of protein. We want to make sure that we're providing enough energy for our training. So nutrition is obviously going to be high on the priority list. Weight training is obviously going to be super high on the priority list as well too. Part of a body recomp is adding muscle, maintaining muscle. And in order to do that, like I mentioned earlier in this podcast, we need to lift weights. So that's going to be high on the priority list, because without it, we're not going to be able to build or maintain muscle. And so that takes out half of the equation of a body recomp. So right there, weight training is going to probably have a little bit of a higher priority than that. So nutrition, weight training, again, weight training is probably number one. Nutrition is going to be two. Movement's also going to be important here. So I'm just talking overall steps, and movement overall is going to be very important. With those three things, you can have a body recomp. You can get yourself into energy deficit, energy maintenance, energy surplus. You've got the weight training aspect of it through building muscle, or you got the building muscle aspect through the weight training, and then the nutrition, again, with that, making sure you get enough protein in, et cetera, can be helpful there. Those are your big rocks. Those are things that we really want to make sure we get dialed in. We don't want to place cardio higher than those in a body recomp. Now, obviously, if just improving your cardiovascular health is priority number one, then that's going to take precedent above these things. Or if you have a marathon or something you need to run, again, that's going to probably take a little bit of a higher priority on this. But in terms of a body recomp, it's going to fall a little bit lower. But I do think adding in some conditioning cardio, again, preferably some zone 2, right? That's that intensity there, that heart rate intensity where it's enough to get those aerobic adaptations, but it doesn't add a ton of fatigue. So you can really accumulate a ton, and it helps with your recovery overall. Obviously, improving your aerobic base will help with recovery, but then also, and that's the main benefit of it, right? That's why we'll do steps, because steps get us that energy expenditure, but also can be great from a recovery standpoint, where zone 2 is going to be good for the cardiovascular benefits. You're going to get a little bit of energy expenditure out of it. However, it will come at a higher hunger cost probably for most people, but in turn, it does help with your recovery later on down the line as well too. And so we want to make sure that the big rocks are taken care of first, and then we can go in and add cardio based on time. Again, I would put this right at the bottom of this list in terms of the things I just talked about, but it is important. I think it's a probably underutilized aspect for a lot of people, and it's an adaptation that a lot of people that they could benefit from, and it would really help with their body recomp. So again, it's not mandatory. You don't have to do it, but again, I think it's missing in most people's programs, and it's going to have some additive effects in terms of your body recomp from a recovery standpoint. Obviously, just better cardiovascular health is good for overall health. Better overall health is going to help you with a body recomp. And then I think also one thing too that maybe goes unnoticed with the cardio is I think it will allow you to you're not going to fatigue as quickly in your sets, which allows you to push closer to failure, which in turn is going to help us with muscle growth. It's going to allow you to probably go to higher intensities in your training, because you're going to be able to fight through that fatigue. So again, there's some indirect ways that it can help with muscle growth. How much would you need to do? I think any amount. If you can only do 1 45-minute session per week, that's a great start. If you can do 2, that's great. If you can do 3, again, it's probably the only thing from a programming standpoint is we just don't want to put it right before our weight training. Otherwise, because it's not high, because it's doesn't come with a high fatigue cost, we can place it really throughout the week where we need to, so long as it's not like right before your weight training session there with that. So we have a lot of flexibility there with it. I've talked to Brian Borstein, he mentioned this to me. He did find that if he did his zone 2 right after weight training, his heart rate was a little bit higher. So that's going to play a role in it. So you might want to, again, try to separate that if you can. But obviously, if that's the only time you can do it, it is what it is. So you might want to try to split these up a little bit if possible. But for sure, in a body recomp, we want to make sure that the weight training is priority number 1 over the cardio, and the cardio is a secondary stimulus that we're going to be going for here. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this. This is it for this episode. I will see you guys next time. Talk to you then.